First of all, I'd like to welcome colleagues to Cabinet. Are there any apologies for absence? I think everyone's here, aren't they? So we've got a full house. That's good. So declarations of interest.
Thank you, Leader. There are a number of reports where declarations will have to be declared, members. If I can respectfully advise that Councillor Richard Clark, as you are a LEA Governor for Crossy-Killiarga School and Primary School, you have a personal interest which will need to be declared, and also I understand you're a reserve for the EAS, and we have a business plan for agenda item number 7. Councillor Cunningham, I believe you're an LEA Governor for St Albans RC High School, thank you, so you'll have a personal interest only in that. Councillor David Daniels, you're a LEA Governor for Cwmbran High School, so there'll be an interest there, and also you're a Director of the EAS, which will need to be declared. Thank you. Councillor Wellington, you're an LEA Governor for Cwmbran High School, so you will have a personal interest. And then Councillor Gwenara Clark, because your granddaughter is across at Killiog School, you'll have a personal interest but also a prejudicial interest. So then when we get to agenda item number 8, you will have to leave, and that applies then to 9 and 10. Thank you very much.
I received an email in the week suggesting that I should declare an interest because I was a governor at Griffithstown School. I had difficulty in connecting Griffithstown School to Crossy-Killiarga because it was in that context that the email was suggesting that I might have an interest. Griffithstown Primary School isn't a natural...
I do apologise, thank you.
That's okay.
You wouldn't have a personal interest because it's not a feeder school for the high school. Yes, we are. Thank you very much.
Right, is everyone happy with that? Right, great. So we can go on to the minutes of the meeting on the 14th of February then. I'll just go through for accuracy and for any matters arising. I've got page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10 and 11, and page 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 and 18. Is everyone happy with those as a true and accurate record? Great. Okay, on to item number 5 then. Update on actions. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Leader. They're just there for members' information unless members have any questions.
Any questions? No. Can move on to agenda item number 6 then, the reforming local government white paper response.
Thank you. Forgive me, the mouse isn't made for left-handers. There's a bit of discrimination going on here. There we go. Okay, thank you, Leader. I'm going to just take members through the covering report for this item, which is a summary really of the key points in the white paper. I understand, Leader, that then you will want to say something about the response, and obviously I'll be happy to answer any questions from members on it. This is a white paper which is the precursor of an intended local government bill, which we believe, subject to assembly time, will be introduced in the autumn of this year. So clearly after the election, and will be a matter for the any future administration. There has been a history, as members I'm sure know and have rehearsed many times, of proposals for local government reform, our responses, different cabinet secretaries having different views. We now have a cabinet secretary for finance and local government, Mark Drakeford, who is very clear that his approach is that he wishes to engage in this process through dialogue, and he has so far been true to his word and been very active in consulting on a personal basis local authorities involved. So this is the latest formal consultation. It's a white paper which is entitled Reforming Local Government Resilient and Renewed. It was issued for consultation on the 31st of January, and the consultation will close on the 11th of April. This is the last opportunity that the Cabinet in this administration will have to comment on it. The main features of this white paper are that it is proposing 4 alternative regional structures, and those are set out in the report. If I can just get the technology is letting me down, I'm afraid. Anyway, members will see it's at 3.4. The first one is mandating prescribed footprints for regional working. That's an option whereby local government, Welsh Government rather, specify the services that are going to be delivered and the footprints upon which they would be delivered. So it's very mandatory, and Welsh Government tells us what's going to happen. The second one is mandating a framework. That's option 2. So Welsh Government would say, these are the services we think you ought to collaborate on. We'll leave the footprint up to you. The third option, which is the one that's put forward in the white paper as the preferred option, is a framework and a footprint. And that means that some services, Welsh Government would say you must do these services on a regional basis and you must do them on this footprint. There will be others where they will say these services need to be regionalised, but we'll leave it up to you to determine the footprint. That's the preferred option. And the fourth one is what's called deliberatively regional, which basically means that people can determine what they want to do in their local area according to discussions on a one-to-one basis with Welsh Government. So the third option, framework and footprint, is the one that's recommended. There's still a proposal that voluntary mergers would be allowed and that they would be encouraged and supported. It's not clear from the white paper what sort of support that would be should any authorities in Wales wish to take that forward. At 3.5 you will see that the proposals would mean that economic development, transport planning and strategic land use would go forward on a city deal footprint, and members will be familiar with that because that's something we've discussed recently. I'm talking about option 3 now, the preferred option. The second part of that is that education, social services, Welsh language and some back office services would then have to be regionalised, but we would determine within our area what footprint we'd regionalise those on. And the third part of option 3 is that there would be some other services which we could talk about should we wish to do so, but there wouldn't be a mandatory requirement to organise those on a regional basis. The white paper goes on to talk about joint governance committees being the key governance mechanism for holding these issues to account. We've already set up a joint cabinet for City Deal via council reports across the 10 councils. It seems to me that the joint governance committees that are being proposed are analogous to that. And there's also discussion of a mandatory financial framework for those joint governance committees so that we are clear exactly on what basis finances are organised and distributed. There's a talk about shared expectations for leadership, which is about refreshing the statutory partnership scheme between Welsh Government and local government, and a power of general competence, which was in the previous local government bill, which would give us a lot more powers to do a great deal more things on a much more innovative basis. There's a section on elections and voting, which is something I'm sure that members would have particular views on. And there's a lot of additional detail within the white paper, which members will see if you've read the response, the draft proposed response. We've covered each of the questions in some detail right across the white paper. So, members, that's a summary of a very complex document, and I know that the leader has some comments that he would wish to make on that.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I don't intend to go through the response point by point. You can see it at Appendix 1, starting on page 25, and it's a very thorough response, and thank you to both Richard as the Deputy Leader and the Chief Executive for helping to put that together. Maybe just make a few initial observations, really, and welcome the approach that the Cabinet Secretary's taken to this issue. He's taken an approach very much of talking to the 22 local authorities and listening to our thoughts about how to take this forward best. I think that's a very pragmatic response, and it's one that's worthy of commendation because it's also one that involves listening and talking with us and seeing how we can best move this forward pragmatically. The Chief Executive mentioned the framework and the footprint concept. That's very much built around principles of subsidiarity, really, the theory that different decisions on different issues are best taken at different levels, and we see that at first hand in local government every day. The decisions we take as a council, some would benefit from greater scale, some, if you gave greater scale on everything, would lose out the very local aspect of them and the local accountability that's I think very important. And I think maybe previous efforts to tackle this issue haven't placed enough sort of stead by that local democratic process, which I think is very important. And because if you have services delivered just on an entirely regional basis without any link to local areas, then they become detached and become less accountable. And I think that's regrettable. So I think it's important that in local government we take forward these proposals in the spirit that they're presented and intended, really. We have to keep outcomes for citizens at the forefront of our minds in what we do to discuss things going forward and how we can sustain outcomes for citizens in an increasingly difficult funding situation as more and more money is cut from us due to UK government funding cuts for public services. We have to look at how we can provide for our citizens more effectively in the future. I think in Gwent we've got a pretty unique and strong perspective. Our history of working regionally, I think, is much more developed than other parts of Wales and can perhaps be something that can be learnt from in other parts of Wales. I was pleased to welcome the Cabinet Secretary to the SRS earlier this week to talk about some of the work that we've done to work not only with our neighbouring councils but also the police in Gwent and hopefully other public services moving forward as well to both make savings and to deliver services more effectively by working together. And that's something I think that we should keep moving forwards with. The later questions, as the Chief Executive pointed to, address some of the concerns that we have in the White Paper on issues like voting arrangements and governance arrangements for councils. There is a danger, I think, if different councils go in different directions, the public understanding of what happens will be diminished. We, I think, in this council have a particular view of PR and local government that's not positive. I believe that breaks the link between members and their wards that we represent, and I think that's a fundamental part of our job as councillors. So I think other cabinet members may have something more to say about that, but I think it's worth us coming back. I think it's in the 22, 25 and 28 are the relevant questions that we answer we sort of give our views on those areas. Any other cabinet members want to speak at this point? Moving to the recommendations in the report then. If I can get up to the right page quick enough. I'm scrolling up. The recommendations are on page 23 and 24, and that we approve the consultation response attached to Appendix 1. Is everyone in favour of that? No. Anyone against? No, that's carried then. Thank you very much. Right, we now move to agenda item 7, which is the Education Achievement Service Business Plan 2017 to 2020 and Local Authority Annex. And I'll bring in Dermot.
Thank you, Leader. twice. Oh no. Well, I can find the right page. We are on page 67. Okay. There we go. All right, thank you, Leader. This report is obviously the annual sort of revisit of the EAS business plan. So this report presents the South East Wales EAS business plan for 2017 to 2020. The plan sets out the priorities and programmes and outcomes to be achieved by the EAS on behalf of the whole consortium, and obviously specifically for us in Torvine. And the report has an appendix to it which gives the outcomes we expect to see in Torvine during 2017-18 and beyond. The EAS business plan in 5.2 sets out the priorities, things that we've talked about in scrutiny at this forum and other forum before. No surprises there in terms of raising aspiration and outcomes for learners, in terms of improving the quality of teaching and learning, improving leadership across the region, to refine the regional national literacy and numeracy strategy, lead and support appropriately challenged schools to implement successful futures, which is the Donaldson report, and the new curriculum development, which many of our schools are involved in, and to rationalise the regional model for the self-improving system, all of which is in the full report. We can talk about in more detail if members wish. I draw your attention to 5.5, and which just gives you detail on the financial arrangements for the core funding for the EAS. So that's the funding that we provide directly, and other authorities would provide their own amounts. We've just got the Torvine contribution here. This represents a further 3% efficiency saving this year, which we've asked from the EAS, and the company board have agreed to. You'll see in that table that the contribution from Torvine has changed significantly over time. So from 2012-13, where we were contributing £760,000 and a little bit, that's now reduced down to £546,000. So you're talking about a 42% reduction in the contribution for the core funding that we make. And I know that's a question that comes up in terms of value for money repeatedly, but that's something to draw your attention to. The overall core funding budget, I think, is around £5 million, and there's a further 50 million available through grant funding to the EAS. So it's quite a significant amount of funding that actually now comes directly from Welsh Government and doesn't come from the local authorities. The consultation process was quite an extensive one, and certainly I, with fellow directors, were involved in that. We've also discussed the EAS business plan with scrutiny here, and the full range of consultees is available in 6.1. The risks associated with this report are important just to bear in mind. The risk register was something that Aston talked to the EAS about in its visit last year, and they're coming again in September. We've actually supported, I think Nigel and his team have supported the EAS to look at the risk register and use our model. So that register is now available on the company's website and is much improved. So I think Aston will hopefully be saying to us that that's now fully addressed. 8.2 is an important point where we know in the annex, the outcomes for this year are outlined there. We've obviously improved the level of scrutiny and support that we put to schools and to the EAS because of the disappointing results that we had last year. So a significant amount of work has been done. But 8.2 points out factually that there have been significant changes in the curriculum specifications this year for Key Stage 4. And Welsh Government and the WJEC, the Examinations Board, expect to see volatility in the results. So I think quite properly we're just highlighting there that we expect to see some change because of the changes, some change and potential change in the expected outcomes because of those changes in the curriculum affecting English, Maths and Science, which are all going to follow this year. Will be no different from any other authority in Wales in that regard, but I think it's a fair point just to point that out. We will be providing a members' briefing on those changes, which we're just arranging at the moment to make sure that all members are aware of that changing landscape. There'll be further changes we know coming through in subsequent years. Those will be picked up in the next iteration of the business case, because obviously with successful futures and Donaldson, the whole curriculum is changing as well. Measures of success are outlined in 10.1. Again, there are no sort of particular comments I'd make to there other than they're there and available. The business plan is available as an appendix But really, Chair, I'll stop there and say I commend the adoption of the new business plan and the recommendation there in 12.1.
Great. David, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, just briefly, the business plan has been the product of a lot of work, and it shouldn't be seen as the EAS have driven this in a sense. Clearly they've been at the heart of this, but the work done by the directors in pushing this as well has been significant, and the Joint Educational Group has crawled over it. It's been properly scrutinised, I think, and it's the outcome of a lot of work, and I think we're moving in the right direction. I've said it before, but I think it's worth saying again that the EAS was never, to begin with, something that I took instantly to heart, but over the last couple of years particularly, they are moving in the right direction, and I think the current business plan is a reflection of how much that is the case. And I'm sure that if you all read it and think about it seriously, obviously ask questions, that's what Dermot is here for. But I think it's a good business plan. It's sound. The caveats that Dermot implied in terms of risks, in terms of particularly what is coming down in terms of changes in the system, Key Stage 4 particularly. But these are risks, these are challenges that Torfaen, along with the other 4 authorities in the EAS, and more significantly perhaps, every authority in Wales who will also be subject to this. So it isn't meant to be seen as something that is going to be catastrophic. It's something that we will have to accommodate and move forward with, but we'll be on the same kind of level playing field with everybody else. I would commend it and hope that everybody else feels the same way as well.
Anyone else want to come in at this point? I'm just quite interested in 5.5 there about the 42% reduction, because obviously that means, being as this is effectively a zero-sum game in the end of it with our budgets, that means more money to go to schools directly, and that's part of the reason we've been able to increase our per pupil funding of schools by 15% in the past 5 years, because we've been able to make savings in this area. I say that because obviously we're unapologetic in our quest for, improving standards, and we're often, onto the AS, asking them quite rightly what they've done about things. But the value for money can't be overlooked really, because it does mean that more money can go direct to schools.
I think it's an excellent point, well made. I would only add this, that the reduction in our funding, at the same time as results overall going up, that would constitute a real value for money, in a sense. We can't be complacent about the results side of the equation, and we are working closely with the EAS in order to obviate those areas and elements that might obstruct our clear path forward, given what happened last year. I believe that the reduction in funding is a good step forward, because what it does show is that there is some degree of productivity and efficiency and effectiveness in that area. But we shouldn't ignore the fact that we still have a lot of work to do in improving results, and we are working very, very closely with the EAS to do that. And as and when we clear these hurdles and progress towards better results, then the clearer this notion of value for money in that particular context will be seen.
Well put. If I can move members to the recommendations then on page 63 or 64, is that? 70, right? Sorry, just typing over the page numbers. So the recommendations that Cabinet members approve the ES Business Plan 2017-2020 and the Local Authority Annex. All those members in favour? Anyone against? No, that's carried. Thanks, Dermot. Then is item number 8, to determine the proposal following the consultation of the statutory objection period on Crossy Killyog School. Obviously, there's a number of education items coming up. If we can leave the sort of the wider debate about post-16 to agenda item 9 and deal with this item first, I understand, then that's the best way forwards.
Thanks, Chair. In fact, just to sort of reiterate that point in 5.9, I'll just go through that because it sort of makes that point clear. So this proposal relates only to the 11 to 16 capacity of Crossy Killyog School. The post-16 capacity is unaffected by this particular report, but obviously that is subject to a separate consultation on the proposed closure of English medium school basic funds, which we'll look at subsequently on this agenda. So this is, whatever else happens, this proposal still needs to be addressed and it won't be impacted by post-16. It's just about 11 to 16 provision at the school. So, key messages here in terms of the consultation was obviously in respect of this proposal ran from the 17th of October to the 20th of November. The outcome of that consultation was considered by Cabinet back on the 17th of January. And subsequent to that, it was agreed at Cabinet that we'd go on to statutory consultation on the proposal to reduce down to 1,200 in terms of the admission number, and the objection period ran from Thursday the 26th of January to Thursday the 23rd of February 2017. Obviously, following that consultation, we're required to produce a report, and that's attached in the appendix. In terms of the statutory notices proposed the 26th of January, as I said, 5.1 outlines that consultation process along with section 6. In total, 3,500 copies were actually distributed. That's outlined in 5.2. As a result of that, we had 4 objections, 3 from individual members of the public and 1 from the NASUWT, the National Association Union of Women Teachers. National Association. I should remember the NASUWT teaching union. Obviously, a file of the objections has been in the members' room during the statutory objection period. As the Council has received objections, it must obviously now consider those in light of the School Organisation Code. The risks in this particular report, and I think it's because there's only been 4, it might be useful just going through them all if that's helpful. But clearly, the risks here relate to the ability of the Council to achieve and maintain our target for surplus places, which we're currently meeting. It's around 10%, and we're currently achieving that. So this is important to make sure we continue to do so. Delays in finalising the design for the new school, which obviously we're proceeding with, and quite an advanced stage now with the school in terms of that design process, could be at risk. So obviously we have to go back and reconsider, and clearly that would have implications for the budget for the new school as well, because that's capped at what the demand that we've agreed with Welsh Government the future demand will be, which we think is around 1,200. So the actions to be taken following are outlined, which give you a view of the timescale then for what will happen, because we're looking for implementation in September 2018. So not this September, the following September. So at that point, Chair, I'll stop. It's a very straightforward report. We're obviously saying that we should proceed despite the 4 objections we've had. The appendix outlines our response to these objections, and you may wish to go through those. But I'll stop there and ask for questions.
Anything to add, members? If we look through the appendix then that goes through the specific responses, we're happy with the response to each of those points of objection. Dermot?
In terms of absolutely, so starting on page 113, excuse me, the first one's really about the catchment school for where I reside is red, and I don't want to send my children there. Now, the National Model for School Improvement categorises schools from green, yellow, amber, red. It's a process that looks at performance in the school, capacity for change and leadership. It's about support. So what we said in the response there is really saying that Eston have already come back to us and said they believe that the quality of education it's the third paragraph. Overall, the view of Aston received in response to the initial consultation is that the proposal is likely to at least maintain the current standards of education in the area. We're working very closely with all of our schools. It goes back to the previous paper on the AS. We have a very clear support mechanism in place for those schools. So we're confident that simply because the school is currently red, it won't be there in an ongoing basis, and the quality of education will be at least as good. So I think this comes into some of the other questions about choice and the parents raised later on over the page. Really what we're saying there is, you know, we have to provide suitable education placements for all pupils. We're working very closely with the schools to make sure the quality of that education is available. Parents don't have the right in law to choose the school that they go to, the right to express a preference. So really, we're not taking away parental choice per se, other than clearly we have to also have regard to the other part of the law which says we have to reduce surplus places. That's a tension for parents, we recognise that, but we're confident in the way that we're working with all of our schools that all children, and Eston agree with this, are receiving appropriate education. So that really covers actually most of the points raised, Chair.
In terms of the staffing transition, we believe, I see in the response that it's sufficiently gradual for it to be manageable.
Staff, that's the one point I was going to come back to, obviously the point from the NASUWT. We would like to be able to put a plan in front of everyone right now and say this is exactly who's going to be impacted and what that's going to look like, and here are the timescales. Because of the nature of the process, we have to work our way through this in a linear fashion. So subject to this being approved today, we'll be sitting down with the staff, the leadership team in the school, to look at what the implications for them would be, and plan that out over the next couple of months. So this is the time that the schools start to look at the planning structures and the curriculum offer. So we're not in a position to give that detail yet, but we'd anticipate being in that position by the end of the year, sorry, the academic year. And obviously in Torvine, we, on an annual basis, have a change management budget for schools alone of around £800,000. So it's almost at the same scale as the ABS review that the Council conducted recently. We have a very good track record of avoiding compulsory redundancies and of redeployment. So we have lots of experience in trying to get this right. Always a painful process for the individuals involved, we understand that. But we're well experienced, and we think we'll be able to use that experience to make sure we ameliorate the impact for those individuals.
If I can take members, if no one else wants to contribute to the recommendations at 11.1 in the report, it's recommended that Cabinet 1 considers the outcome of the statutory objection period and process and agrees to proceed with the proposal. 2, notes the requirement to publish a notice in accordance with the Education Determination of Admission Arrangement Wales Regulations 2006, and 3, subject to the satisfactory completion of recommendation 2 above, agrees to the implementation of the proposal to reduce the 11-16 capacity of Crossy School to 1,200 places with effect from 1st September 2018. Cabinet members in favour? Anyone against? No, that's carried then. Thank you, Dermot.
So, Chair, this paper is then about the post-16 proposals and is about the outcome of the statutory consultation period, and again in the appendix gives an account of all the responses that we've had to the statutory proposals around the establishment of a new English medium sixth form centre, replacing all current sixth forms in English medium schools, and making a regulated alteration to Crossing Keelyog School, who would be impacted, Cumberland High School and St Albans, by ending sixth form provision. Obviously, we've been through a long process in terms of getting to this point, and the outcome of the consultation was previously considered by Cabinet on the 17th of January, which led to the publication of the statutory notices. That was published on the 10th of January. Sorry, the statutory was published on the 26th of January, get my details right. And in this instance, we sent out 13,500 copies of the consultation document. Again, in 5.2, and I'm sorry I've lost it on the screen, those were sent out to all the statutory consultees, which are detailed in the report, if I can find the right page number, 21. Too many papers, Chair. So, obviously, again, anyone wishing to make an objection could do so within 28 days of the date of the proposals were published. We have had a few that have come in after that date as well, but in total, 81 statutory objections were received, which are detailed in 5.4 for you. So 72 individual responses from school-based staff, parents, carers, former students, pupils and other interested parties. We've had a response from the head teacher of Our Ladies of the Angels, RC Primary, the governing body of the same school as well. And I'll turn the page. The governing body of Crossy Killiog Secondary School and the governing body of the same school. I think we had a number of submissions from the school in total. The governing body of St Albans, Roman Catholic High School, the head teacher of Padre Pio, St Albans Pontypool Parish Advisory Committee, NASUWT and St Albans High School Student Council. Again, all of these are detailed in the appendix attached. So in addition to the statutory obligations, we are also aware of an online petition at change.org opposed Torvine's post-16 proposals, and also received during the statutory objection period. This petition contained 808 signatures, and again, there's a screenshot in the attached report, and it gives details of that too. So by the 24th of February, that had risen to 964 signatures. Again, members have had a copy of all the objections during the statutory objection period to be placed in the members' library prior to the report being issued. Having carefully considered all of the comments made, it is still the considered position that the proposal stands on its own merits and should proceed. So, Chair, again, because in this instance, there have been so many consultation responses, clearly what we have to do in the consultation report is cluster those together, pick out those themes, and then give a clear answer to the issues raised, which we think we have done. I'll stop maybe there, because this is obviously quite a meaty response, and ask if there's any questions at this point.
Any questions from members at this point before we maybe go into the actual responses to the points made?
So, Chair, it may take us quite an extensive time to go through all of these, so if I pick out a couple of key issues, and obviously I'm not trying to cover every single one, so members please be aware if there are points I'm missing out, please do ask, because there's quite an extensive range. So on page 131 of your bundle, the objections actually begin. So there are a number of points raised about the quality of education in the college as opposed to sixth form education. I take the liberty of saying that some of that was informed by people's uninformed view of the actual quality of education that College Glen provides. So what we tried to do in our response is obviously look at the facts and look at the data that's actually published. One of the things that's quite difficult for the moment in comparing school-based sixth form provision with FE-based sixth form provision is the way that Welsh Government collect the data. And there are different methods for collecting that data between the two, but we try to take account of that in the responses. So the first point was saying basically that lower pass rates at A-level in sixth form compared to sixth forms. Now, despite the difficulty in that collation of that information by Welsh Government, it is possible to say the overall pass rates are broadly comparable. So in 2015, for instance, the pass rate in Torvine was 99.6%. That's A*G, because that's the measure. And they have the Vale Learning Zone, which is the same model that we're proposing that's already in existence in Blaenau Gwent. Blaenau Gwent Local Authority have entered into partnership with Coleg Gwent and will provide education themselves. The learning campus there it does. The outcome there was 99.6%, and Cross Keys was 99.2%.
Before we move on to other issues, on educational achievement and performance per se, is the feeling that people's views maybe of college provision is maybe based on an old system of sixth forms running alongside college provision as opposed to a post-16 centre per se? Because, you know, people may have had a view from when you had sixth forms and a college for people who didn't quite manage to get in to do A-levels at sixth form.
It's impossible, obviously, to know what was in people's minds when they were doing the responses, but I think what does come through is a lot of anxiety, quite clearly, about a system that people aren't familiar with. Because what you're describing, Leader, there, of course, hasn't existed in Torrine for some time. And what we're proposing slightly different as well. So I think a lot of the responses were about speak of fear, of change, and people don't have a comparison to make. So one of the tasks on this subject to approval today is obviously to work with the college to look at demystifying some of the concerns that people have about the pastoral support mechanisms for their young people, for their children, the quality of tutorial support, for instance, the spiritual support, because that comes up as a theme as well, particularly from faith-based schools, where people may have a view of college as being quite a cold, clinical, dispassionate place, where learners aren't nurtured in the same way that they feel is happening in sixth forms. But college clearly would have a very different view of the pastoral support and the care and attention that it brings to its learners, and would argue, I speak for the college, but coming through in their results, they're achieving at least comparable results. And that wouldn't be happening if learners weren't happy and didn't feel safe.
And you mentioned the retention rates are considerably above what they are in post-16 centres, in school provision.
Again, the data on this is quite difficult to grab hold of because it's not captured by Welsh Government in terms of sixth form provision in schools. But the way that retention rates are measured and the way that the colleges or the FE institutions are measured does look at real retention rates. So one of the issues I think for us historically has been when schools report, so in 2015 we were saying 99.6% pass rate, was that of the entire cohort who started in 2014, or was that the pass rate for those learners who persisted through until the end of 2015? That's how the college would be gauged in its success. That's not how schools are gauged. So schools are gauged in terms of the results they report on the actual learners who sat the exam. So we've had a concern for some time about the dropout rates from schools, and that's a picture nationally, it's not just in Torrine.
So moving on to staffing then, because there are a number of points made by teaching unions there that were addressed in the report. Do you want to summarise those ones?
Yeah, again, the change management process that we would look at is something that isn't covered in what we call the local compact agreement. So within schools in Torrine, we have an agreement with the trade unions to look at how we would redeploy staff. Because we're looking at the college taking over the delivery of sixth form provision, that compact wouldn't apply. So there's been some anxiety about, well, how would that change be managed and what would it look like for individual teachers. So some of the points here again are about the college wouldn't offer teachers paying conditions. There's some concern about zero-hour contracts and so on. College Quent doesn't use any zero-hour contracts. It uses the national terms and conditions for FE and the national pay scale. So those are, by the definition, nationally agreed. And the annual leave for an FE lecturer is 46 days per year. Obviously quite significantly more than the council. Okay, so I think 31's our position in council, plus bank holidays. So there are some differences, but they are covered in the national conditions. There's clearly a risk that there will be some loss of staff, and we've known that from the beginning in terms of our discussions. Again, as I sort of referred to in the previous on the previous paper, we're not at a point where we can look at what the scale of that is likely to look like, because we need to do the curriculum planning with our schools in Torrine and with the college. And look at how schools in Torrine want to change their own TLR structures, teaching and learning responsibilities and leadership structures, and that will have an impact. So there's a lot of work to do before we can get to the point of these are the people who are in scope. Again, I would repeat, we've got a good record in terms of redeployment and looking at how we can minimise the impact of these sorts of changes. And the college have also said, and been very clear, that they will offer teachers who are at risk the opportunity to come for interview with them for specific jobs in the college. And as part of the transition discussions we've had with the college and Welsh Government, we're keen to make sure that whatever those transition arrangements look like, which will come up as a question later, that we also make sure that those staff are protected and that we don't do anything that might minimise their chances of employment. So it's a complicated picture of trying to bring lots of different planning strands together. I know that's going to be frustrating for staff and the trade unions, because I like to have a plan to be able to show you, but that's just not where we are in the process. Again, I'm hoping that we'll be in that position with school support, because the college support is already there. We need to work with the schools now over the coming term to get to that position where we've got clarity about the plan and the curriculum going forward.
So a fair summary is that you'll work with the college and with our current schools to minimise the impact on staff and work with them to explore the opportunities that could be presented to them.
And I should just say as well, because we discussed it with the college yesterday at the officer support group, and the secondary head teacher was there, that the college have already met with the deputy heads and had discussions about what the planning will start to look like. So some of those initial discussions, although not formally part of the process, are already underway, and the college has met with those deputy heads.
I'm just very keen that that's a constructive process as much as possible, and it doesn't sort of lapse into sort of barriers being put up there. You know, I'd hate, for example, for our teachers not to have the best possible opportunity to apply for jobs if that's what they wanted to do in the post-16 centre, because we've got some excellent teachers who may want to do that, and it would be a real shame if they were, for example, prevented from having the opportunity to show Coleg Gwent what they can do in front of their own classes.
Absolutely, and clearly we'll be in a process with head teachers and governing bodies. I mean, the point that you raised there is that if you're going for an interview, most schools would want to see you teach. Now, most people, going into somebody else's classroom to teach is a bit of extra pressure and is a bit of an ask, because the context is wildly different. Ideally, for instance, and regularly happens with teacher appointments, is that staff might actually come and visit you in your own school and see you teach your own class. So those are the sorts of issues that we want to make sure we get the best possible outcomes for our staff, and those will be the very points that we'll be making. So that clearly is dependent on how we can broker that relationship with our own schools.
The page 133 then goes on to talking about the student continuity and transition arrangements, and that's something else that we can take it as given. We'll work with Coleg Gwent to make as smooth as possible.
Absolutely, and we've already had preliminary discussions with the Welsh Government about how they can help resource some of that, because obviously the scale of what we're talking about is quite significant. We want to make sure that pupils have as seamless a transition as possible. We know transition is a risky time for learners, so we want to make sure we mitigate those risks. There are a number of different models that transition can look like. So some people in the consultation want absolute guarantees that they will look in a particular way, but clearly that's part of the partnership discussions we need to have with schools, with the college and Welsh Government and learners, absolutely as well, about what's the best and the smoothest sort of transition process we can have. There are some good examples in Wales, and there are some less good examples in Wales where this has been attempted. So we are taking advice from Welsh Government, and they've obviously had lots of experience because they've helped resource that. So we will have a transition process that's based around a partnership framework that will involve all the stakeholders to make sure we get the best possible outcome. Will everyone be happy about that model that we came up with? Probably not, because there will be some compromise along the way. But we are absolutely determined that that process begins now, subject to the decision going through, so that we're not going to wait necessarily for a formal decision from the Minister, because that would be one of the next stages in this process. We want to make sure that we've done our contingency planning well in advance.
Lower down, page 134 goes on to ask the questions about pastoral support and ethos. You've already touched on this a little bit, but we believe that Coleg Gwent that can provide that sort of pastoral support for younger people.
Yeah, I think it's a very important component, and certainly was one of the first things when we discussed with the college about their willingness to work with us in the diocese. We have a good working relationship with both dioceses, and we've already had discussions with them about what they would expect to see in a new provision. Coleg Gwent already provides a multi-faith service to its learners, and as part of the design process of a potential build, and there are some plans later in the document as well, we've already had discussions about, well, what would that space look like? How could that be resourced? How could we work with the chaplaincies to make sure that there aren't any issues? So we plan that in, and the diocese also know that there's a sort of resource request there for them, because they'd obviously need to staff that. So those discussions are already underway. So I think we've, from the very beginning, recognised that this would be an issue, and the college were very open as part of this and said, look, hang on, that isn't going to be an issue for us. Let's work with the diocese to make sure we get the best possible solution if this model goes forward. And then in terms of pastoral support, that was obviously from a faith-based perspective. I've already touched on, excuse me, halfway down page 135, for example, talks about, so the whole of page 135 talks about the level of pastoral support that's available. Every full-time learner will have a personal tutor to help them with the transition to the new centre. The head of learner services oversees all pastoral support, and there are very clear performance management systems around that. So it's not just one member of staff, it's an issue that the whole leadership team in the college look at. Tutorial programme will consist of regular one-to-one progress reviews and a programme of extracurricular activities. So this isn't just about what courses you're doing. There's a wide range of offer available, and the name will come back to me. It's CG Extra, if I remember rightly, where every student is expected to look at what other opportunities that they could take advantage of in terms of the wider pastoral and sporting and cultural life of the college, for example. So there are, as you would expect in any institution that deals with a wide range of learners, some of whom are very vulnerable, some of whom are actually very able, but maybe haven't had opportunities to explore what they might be interested in. There are a wide range of supports structurally embedded within the college to make sure that every learner's needs are protected. And again, I come back to, you don't get the level of outcomes that the college is getting unless you have that level of social and pastoral support, as well as educational support.
137 then goes on to talk about some questions regarding the investment. How would you respond to the points made in that section?
Yeah, I need to offer an absolute reassurance, and maybe I know Cabinet know this. We're not getting any savings out of this. This isn't a money-saving exercise. What would happen should this go forward in terms of the revenue side of the equation is that the funding would transfer directly from us and go straight to Coleg Gwent. So we wouldn't have any saving coming back to the local authority. Clearly what we're trying to do here is to secure the most robust, comprehensive education offer for post-16 learning in Torvine. So that does mean clearly we'll be putting in £10 million, 50% of the investment for the college, for the new college building run by Coleg Gwent. But in terms of saving, no saving for us. That investment is something that we need for our learners in terms of securing that future. We've made the comment elsewhere in the documents and in discussions that we've had previously that we are concerned about the viability of all of our secondary schools financing going forward. It's a perennial issue across 11 to 18. So we're working with all of our schools at the moment to bring them in a secure financial position over the next number of years. We know that post-16 funding has been squeezed over a period of time. Smaller units give us less choice and are really vulnerable then to changes in the funding mechanism. Bringing that together will ensure we have a wider choice available for all learners in a purpose-built centre that will future-proof us for decades to come. So while of course it's a lot of money, it's a big investment, it is the best investment that we can make given the resources we have and where we think the funding landscape is likely to be over the coming years. I don't think anyone's expecting us to have a huge influx of additional funding into public funding for some time to come, and those pressures in terms of managing budgets are being felt by our secondary schools, all of them now this year, and have been for some time. So this is a very real issue for our secondary schools. And in an ideal world, if funding was in a different place, we may be getting a different view from them. But I think all of our secondary schools understand the pressures that they're facing at the moment, and we're having to work very hard to help them maintain what they're doing for 11 to 16, as well as 11 to 18. This will help address some of that issue in terms of securing 16 to 18.
It's not about saving money, it's about sort of viability and robustness going forward. I think we'll come on to choice in a second, but in terms of just a curriculum choice, but something there. I mean, that section touches on the sort of the north issue. One of the things that attracted me to the location of this site is its accessibility from the north. It may not be in the north because we've not really got a suitable site in the north, but it's accessible via the public transport links from the whole of the borough.
Yeah, I think you said it there. I mean, the population, the location of the proposed centre is in the heart of the population distribution of the learners. That's an important point. We're not a huge borough. We've got one choice, so we need to put it, as we've been consistently saying through the whole 21st Century Schools programme, where the learners are. So this is physically located in direct relation to the distribution of learners in Torvine. The transport links are good. We're talking about one bus to come down to actually go to the centre, as opposed to if you're going to Cross Keys, maybe looking at a much more complicated journey. It should be a shorter journey as well because of that. But it is a journey. We recognise we can't, we've got one centre. There is a compromise in terms of where it can be located. But we think this should make life easier for the majority of students in terms of the transport arrangements, not more complicated.
Moving on to choice on page 138 over onto 139. Obviously it shouldn't be seen as a criticism of the current provision, but we believe this will provide a greater range of subject choice for young people going forwards.
I think choice in this context is obviously about the choice of curriculum. I think parents have also raised the issue about choice of where they can send their youngsters. I'll try and cover both off. And I think you said it again, Leader, I'll refer to my previous comments. Lots of our schools will offer a wide curriculum choice, which is contingent on the number of learners they can sign up to make the course viable. So every year, students may think the course is available, only to find later that actually there weren't enough people who wanted to do that course, because in smaller sixth forms, clearly you've got a break-even point when the school can actually run the course, which is going to be different from one larger institution, where all those learners are concentrated, and actually we can generate viability across a much wider curriculum offer. So small schools are more vulnerable, therefore, to not being able to run courses that people might want to do, as opposed to larger units. So we think that there will be a much wider range of provision, sustainably deliverable over time, because our schools are under pressure. So, for example, modern foreign languages. We've got an issue across Wales in terms of MFL, of youngsters not choosing it for GCSE. So it's a real issue in terms of sixth form provision. So that's something we're looking at with the college now to secure what MFL, modern foreign language, could look like. Music will be another issue in terms of offering that in the centre, which in a way will be more viable, we think, than in smaller units. So we're confident, in advance of having worked out all the details, because we can't do that because of where we are in the stage of the planning, that we'll be able to have that sustainability over a longer period of time. So more learners will be able to choose a wider range of provision. Now, can we guarantee that every single learner doing a particular course or wanting to do a particular course that might be an offer at the moment? That's something that I can't say yes or no to at the moment, other than saying that I know the overall curriculum offer will be wider than is currently available. So in terms of choice, I think that is a much more sustainable position going forward. In terms of choice for parents, I've raised it earlier. Some parents will say, well, my child's not suited to that. And clearly that's something we need to do more work on in helping parents understand the wide range of supports that are available in a college provision and what that will feel like for young people themselves. So we're talking to the college about maybe having some sessions or having some video and some materials prepared by learners who've been through the college experience, so that their council can talk to school councils, maybe provide some video to say, look, this is what a day in the life looks like for me. These are the challenges I faced. Here are the supports I had. Because we know that will be a very common story that young people will recognise from their own experience of going to a sixth form in a school.
Yeah, it's bound to be an attractive place for young people to go to. I mean, without exposing how uncool I was at school, I had the experience of wanting to do further maths and not being able to because of the lack of other people wanting to do it. If you've got that critical mass of young people, hopefully we'll be able to get a high-flying team of Torvine mathletes together and they can thrive off each other. So I have exposed how uncool I am. Right, moving on quickly then to the section on costs. I think you've covered the point.
Before you do that, Chair,
Okay.
can we come on have a comment on some of the comments that's been made in relation to the opposition to this? Because I have to say this, I feel very, very uncomfortable about the fact that, despite what you say, that the faith school provision is not being catered for. I'm extremely concerned that there's nothing on there in the consultation list from both the Church in Wales or from the Catholic Education Service in Cardiff. Now, you've obviously spoken to them, there's no question about that, but there's nothing in there to report that. So I'm concerned about that. I don't think that the faith schools are being catered for, despite what you said about Gwent College. What are the alternatives to that? Because it's going to have a serious effect on schools like the Church in Wales, who use Catholic school, like the Baptists, who use a Catholic school. They all use that school because it has a Christian ethos. I mean, and we're not catering for that, in my opinion, anyway, and obviously so many consultees have said that.
Just to remind Cabinet that the forerunner to this document was the consultation report, which was referred to by Dermot earlier. And as part of that, the Roman Catholic and the Church in Wales Diocese did respond, did raise issues about ensuring that the pastoral needs of children of faith were met in whatever model went forward. Neither diocese has objected in this part of the process, and that's what this process is there for. It affords them an opportunity to say, we object for whatever reasons they wish to put. So I make that distinction first. The response to the issues raised by both the Roman Catholic and the Church of Wales Diocese during the first round of consultation was that the College had quite rightly, in our view, made an open offer to the Diocese and to St Albans to ensure that a model of support that was as best as we can possibly make it in what is acceptably not an entirely faith-based institution would go at least some, if not all the way, to ameliorate the concerns that have been raised. It is accepted that this isn't going to be a St Albans, it isn't going to be a Church in Wales provision. Unfortunately, if it were, and it stood alone, it would probably not survive very long, and if it did survive, its offer would likely go down. That's the whole point, and you've made the point a few times, Leader, in comments already. It's the scale that's going to secure provision here, and if you don't have the scale, the offer to learners is likely to go down. In fact, that risk, I would say, is extremely high, given the way that the grant has moved in the last few years and is likely to move in the future. So it's about choices again. Do you want an institution that stands alone but hasn't actually got much to offer? Or do you want an institution that benefits from scale, can offer as broad as possible a curriculum as we're able to, and work with the diocese and the college in this instance and the council to ensure that the necessary support is there?
Anyone else want to come in on that point? Otherwise, shall we move on to the section on the consultation process at page 142? Any particular comments you want to make in response to the points made there?
Obviously, Leader, again, some comments about the consultation process wasn't meaningful. It's stipulated in terms of the school organisation code. We obviously have some experience in running these consultations now, so we've made sure that we've followed the absolute letter and spirit of the code in terms of ensuring that the process is absolutely fair. There was an issue about consultation with residents around the traffic issues, which has come up, and parking issues as well. Clearly, the consultation period ran as it's outlined there. We've put out 13,500 letters. It's been discussed with all the local schools. It's hard to think how people in those communities couldn't have had access to that consultation. But equally, we know we need to look at the site access as part of the planning process and the whole site development, because the site's not just about FE college going on at Welsh Government on the site currently, and might be looking to develop the site in terms of commercial interests. So there'll be a further consultation around site access and how I know that there are reports of issues around the roundabout and access to that. Those will have to be tackled as part of a subsequent consultation around the planning process should we get to that point.
Moving to the location access transport section at the bottom of 143 then. The points raised there about the location and the access.
So I've just conflated the two things and probably just covered that one in terms of saying that the access issue will be considered as part of any subsequent planning application. In terms of the striped catchment area of the proposed centre's location means it requires students to travel significantly more miles. We don't think that the impact on the majority of students is going to be particularly significant. Some students it will be, we accept that. But clearly, I've already mentioned this, if you're going to Cross Keys from the north of the borough, your journey to your new facility is going to be a lot more straightforward and should be easier to manage.
Moving on to the community impact section then, 145. The points made there about the extracurricular stuff and the impact on Pontypool.
Yeah, in terms of the extracurricular stuff, we just don't accept that point. The standards of the sixth form and the work they carry out and the community enhances the reputation of the school. Why would that stop? Because you haven't got a sixth form. Several of our schools don't have sixth forms, and they already do all of that work. Why would that change? It's just a change, obviously, to the nature of the school, but there's no reason why those connections with the community would need to change necessarily in a significant way. In terms of the impact on Pontypool, we suspect there will be an impact on the economy. It's really very difficult to quantify what that impact will be. I think currently sixth formers who come out during lunchtime, for instance, so there will be an impact on some of the local shops, but we don't know. We don't know how many. We don't know how much they spend. It would be very difficult to actually quantify that in any case. But clearly, the overall benefit brought by the scheme, we think, would outweigh any disadvantages brought by that impact on local traders at lunchtimes during the week.
And of course, we don't live in an ideal world where there is a viable alternative location that's right on the door of Pontypool. Okay, so
that is something aside, really, isn't it? Because St Albans is not going to be there forever, is it? Irrespective of this particular proposal, I mean, there's going to be a time when St Albans will have to move from the current site, I would assume, because of the condition of the premises down there. So I mean, really, that isn't a consideration, is it, in relation to this? Well, it might be at this moment in time, but not.
It's mentioned, Councillor, simply because it was raised as one of the objections that there would be a material impact on the economy of Pontypool. As Dermot said, I think the issue is that, yes, there will be. I think it's almost inevitable that spend of some kinds will go down, if not disappear, from the school. But it's the longer-term benefits, and again, I go back to the point I made before. If you do not change the system as it currently stands, that system will start to creak and fall.
moving on to the section headed alternative options, then that sums up a number of points that were made about potential alternatives. Anything you want to add in that section?
Not really, Chair, other than we couldn't replicate the Welsh medium provision because of what we called immersion there. I always think of heaters when I hear that word. We just couldn't deliver the same outcomes for learners who were coming into a college provision in any way that would compare with what's available. It would include, we wouldn't even dream of putting that past Eston because we know what the response would be, and clearly we rehearsed those sorts of issues through our planning through the West and through the Welsh Education Forum as well. Has the Council considered alternative options such as Newport? We've had a long period of time where we've worked with our secondary schools. We had a 14 to 19 partnership trying to get off the ground for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. 9, 10 years. Which was funded by Welsh Government, and one of the aims of that partnership arrangement, which we used to coordinate in-house before the AS and then with the AS, and neither was successful, was looking at providing a matrix of provision for young people, regardless of the school. So in other words, if you were a youngster attending Crossy-Killiog, maybe you wanted to access further maths, and that was only available at the time, Fairwater High. Well, we should be able to make that happen and arrange that curriculum choice for you. The amount of success we had with that was incredibly small. So there were very few learners able to go to a number of different sites because of timetabling choices by schools, because of some of the barriers that grew up around funding, even though there was funding available to try and remove those. We found it very difficult to get a meaningful partnership and that choice of learning available for learners. So, to be fair, we have tried some of these options and worked with schools and cautioned schools and governing bodies that if we can't make those options work, we'd have to look at alternative scenarios. And I'm afraid that's one of the reasons why we're here today. We've tried that in the past and that didn't work.
So moving down page 147, and there's a section on how it will cater for children with special education needs, in particular dyslexic and autistic pupils is raised there. Are we happy that something can be reached to facilitate those students?
Yeah, the college already has a very well developed additional learning needs department. Chris Denham, I think, leads that up. In fact, Chris was on a video produced by Welsh Government around the introduction of the new Additional Learning Needs Act that was showcased last week with the region. So they've got a range of provision in place. They already have responsibilities under the legislation, which will be strengthened under the new ALN Act, which we expect to go through to have royal assent later this year, which raises expectations and responsibilities for local authorities and other providers from 0 to 25. So the college already has support for those pupils in place. Clearly, for pupils with a specific learning difficulty, be that dyslexia or autistic spectrum disorder, the college already has experience of supporting those pupils. Clearly, we'll be working with the college in terms of transition planning, as we already do. So any learner who's vulnerable, we already have a very effective transition support package from primary to secondary, and we'll be looking to extend that into our work with the college. Again, part of the new requirement under the Act would be that all pupils have an individual development plan. The college already has individual learning plans in place for its learners who are vulnerable, and we'll be looking to bring those systems together so, again, parents can have reassurance that there's a clear continuity in learning for their children, and particularly for children with autism. Lots of preparation so that change can be quite difficult to manage for those learners, that we try to slowly introduce them to their new learning environment. And again, we have lots of experience in achieving successful outcomes for those learners, and we'll bring that to our work with the college.
Any questions about that before we move on to the last section of the response about housing? Obviously, you know, especially the south of the borough is growing in terms of housing developments, and are we positive that these proposals will cater for that?
In short, yes. Not only are we confident that it will deliver for what we anticipate by way of new housing, but we're planning and designing to increase for improved retention rates and improved stay-on rates between years 12 and year 13. So, yes.
Well, thank you for it. I know it's quite time-consuming going through it in that way, but I think it's worth doing to that we all look through the responses and listen to the points that are being made and are reassured that they've been addressed in the response. So thank you for that. Do any other members want to come in now before myself and then David sum up? If I take over and then I'll hand over to David, because obviously he's got the detailed grasp of this, having taken it through and worked very hard on this with officers, and I thank officers and David for the work they've done in this. It's been a very long, some would say much too long over the years in coming to fruition. It's worth beginning really by saying these proposals aren't a negative reflection on any of the work that's done in our existing sixth formers. I think that's important to say, because I know how hard our teachers and staff work for post-16 students in the borough, and nothing in these proposals should be seen as a criticism of those efforts. I also understand that in the times we live in, there's often scepticism about change and a consequent attachment to the status quo. But for me, the status quo just isn't acceptable here. The unequal situation across Torvine has gone on for too long, and it can't be allowed to continue, with some schools having sixth forms, but others not. And as I've maybe hinted at in some of my questions, I do worry about the lack of subject choice for many of our young people in any case. because we do have to be realistic. In the current national funding situation, it's only going to get more and more difficult for single sixth forms to provide an adequate range of subjects at a post-16 level. So I think that really shows that we have to take action. With a single post-16 centre, we can have both a state-of-the-art facility for young people and a wider breadth of provision potentially in one place. I'm very... It's very persuaded if you look at the evidence just up the road in Ebbw Vale. Many people there are unsure about the closure of sixth forms, but they now enjoy a facility that's the envy of many other areas, including us currently here in Torvine. I believe they're beginning to bear the fruit of that decision, both in terms of retention rates, value-added results, entry into HE and so on. And I really think this is a chance for us to demand the best for our young people and to show them that we really value their post-16 education and we want to give them the best, not just give them something that's, that just not to settle for second best really for them. I'm afraid in doing that, I think we have to reject some false choices, even if they're offered by people with the very best of intentions and people who also have the interests of young people in mind. It's not an option for us to have a post-16 centre and sixth forms running simultaneously, in my view. That would just guarantee mutual unviability. And the Welsh Government direction has been clear that in order to attract match funding, what we have to do is have a viable approach for the future. So going forward, I hope we can work with Coleg Gwent to reassure all young people, parents and staff about the plans, which I really do believe are fantastic. And should we go ahead, we must work to ensure a good transition to this new system. We must also ensure that the excellent teaching staff in Torvine get every opportunity to apply for roles in the post-16 centre if that's what they want. For other staff, we must work to minimise the impact of change and assure them that we continue to value their efforts. I believe we've got a good track record of handling such transitions in Torvine, and I hope and believe we can work with Coleg Gwent in that vein. We must also work to show pupils and parents more detail about what we can offer in the new centre, both in terms of the subject offering and in terms of pastoral care. On that subject, I was very pleased to receive an open letter from the principal of Coleg Gwent, Guy Lacey, who's both outlined his commitment to working with us in that respect and offered an insight into the kind of provision. And if you don't mind, I'll just take a couple of minutes to read out the open letter that he sent to me. Dear Councillor Hunt, I was pleased to see the publication of the Cabinet Papers ahead of the meeting on 14th of March and welcome the proposal for the new post-16 centre in Cwmbran. I wanted to take the opportunity of explaining in some detail why I think this is such an important development for young people in Torvine and why Coleg Gwent is so committed to it. The proposed centre promises to offer a modern, purpose-built education facility. The resources for learners will rival the very best that are available in the post-16 sector in Wales and will have an emphasis on the integration of the latest technology to support and enhance learning. The location too is critical as it is in the centre of Cwmbran and so close to the major bus and train hubs that the town provides. Many young people will use the public transport on the location. It makes it accessible and as possible to as many people as possible. But the importance and future success of the centre will be more than just the physical environment it will offer. It will be the opportunity to build a strong and enduring post-16 partnership between the authority, its schools and Coleg Gwent, a partnership that will be based on progression and achievement for all young people and the wider community. Coleg Gwent is extremely proud of the success that this type of model of post-16 education has had for many years in Caerphilly with our Cross Keys campus and since 2012 in the Blaenau Gwent with the Learning Zone. In the Learning Zone, we've developed very strong local partnership working with the authority and the schools, which has supported increased participation in post-16 learning and improved outcomes for young people. A-level results have been consistently good with high pass rates and perhaps even more importantly, there has been consistent positive value added in each year. Data from the University of Durham's A-level information service showed the value added in 2016 results to be in the top 10% of all colleges in the UK. Coleg Gwent is committed to bringing our experience and learning to the Cwmbran Centre and determined to deliver similar outcomes for young people in Torvine. The centre also offers the prospect of an extensive A-level subject range. It will cover all major subjects required by the university sector and allow young people the sort of choice experienced in the rest of Coleg Gwent. Importantly for learners, this also means the best range of combinations of subjects will be available to them, something that is not the case in smaller centres because multiple classes will run in most subjects. Working in partnership will also allow us to focus more clearly on the needs of learners to better support their progression beyond Year 11. The new centre would sit at the heart of a learning partnership that would allow young people in years 10 and 11 to understand more about their choices, experience taster days in the Cwmbran Centre, and have a highly developed support between school and college to make transition as easy and successful as possible. Coleg Gwent is rightly proud of our track record in supporting and caring for our learners, but we know that this is the best when we work closely with partner schools and pupils before they start with us. The Cwmbran Centre will offer exactly this type of service. The proposals for a new post-16 centre in Cwmbran is an exciting and significant opportunity for us to work together to bring about a fundamental change in post-16 education in Torfaen. I firmly believe that the sort of improvements seen in both Blaenau Gwent and Merthyr Tydfil following similar changes will also happen in Torfaen. That is, sustained reductions in the level of young people who are NEET, improvements in outcomes in Key Stage 4, increased participation and improved outcomes in post-16 education. I welcome the opportunity to work with you and your officers on this important project. I think it's important to read that out, not because I think this is a finished process, but really to outline that it's, you know, if we do go ahead with this decision, I think that's the good basis of a positive partnership to work together to deliver for the young people for their post-16 education. And on that basis, I'd like to hand over to Councillor Yole.
It was my own fault because I didn't elect to go last. What I can say now isn't a great deal because it's already been said, and very eloquently by Dermot in the way that he answered the questions and in the summing up of the leader. And I thank him for that because it is important to have total support, and Anthony and Bob before him in the leader's position have given their fulsome support to this project. I'd like to pick up on a couple of points and perhaps amplify them. I think it is important, and until Anthony's last couple of minutes, it wasn't commented on, and that is one of the reasons why the post-16 project has been attempted, or a solution to the post-16 situation has been attempted over the best part of a couple of decades, is because of the dislocate between not necessarily the north of the borough and the south of the borough with respect to post-16, but indeed between Cwmbran and the rest of the borough. And I think it's an unequal situation that was wrong and untenable in terms of how we perceive the futures for all of our learners in the borough, and not just those who happen to live in particular areas where post-16 flourish. And I think they do flourish because both Dermot and Anthony have referenced the fact that this project isn't necessarily a criticism of the teaching of our sixth form students and our post-16 in general in those schools that have post-16. That's not the issue at all. It's a question of choice, and choice comes in two levels. The wider choice that allows for people north of Cwmbran to have a choice of where they go. One of the interesting things that hasn't been referenced is the notion of how many potential post-16 pupils we've lost to the education system as a consequence of the perception, and a very, very real and realistic one as well, that there is a shortcoming in the post-16 provision. And what I'm referring to here is that people from the very north of the borough have, in the past, we have had some very, very good students at GCSE with good raft of GCSE results, or Key Stage 4 results, who've chosen not to go on to post-16 education simply because there is, in their mind, an inadequate choice. So this choice, this project widens that choice, but it also allows for greater choice of subject and subject variation, because not only is the broad mass of pupils that we expect to go to the institution permitting this expansion of the number of A-levels, but as Anthony referenced, there will be multiple classes in most subjects, which means that the variability and the diversity of choice, for example, one of the fears going forward particularly with respect to the reduction in the funding of post-16, is that there will be a foreshortening of subjects available, and indeed there will be the usual and general subject area, like maths, sciences, and so on and so forth. More and more universities, and particularly the Russell Group of universities, are identifying what they consider to be the better students, those pupils who actually choose to have a diversity of A-levels. For example, English, maths and a science, or geography, RE and a science, but a mixture of subjects that isn't necessarily on offer with that kind of availability than it will be in the new college system. Go into the outcomes. The results in the nearest comparator that we have is the learning zone at Evervale, and I've been there on 3 occasions now, both with the current leader and the previous leader, and a visit on my own, and I'm impressed by talking to both Guy Lacey and Mr Sexton, the head at Blaenau Gwent Learning Zone, when they talk about the examination results. They are second to none, not just in the Gwent area, but in the whole of Wales, and I'm particularly pleased with the emphasis that they place on value added. It isn't a hothouse learning place for high calibre A-level students. They have a lot of high calibre A-level students who are flourishing in that environment and going on to higher education. But they also have a plethora of pupils for whom middle order grades are about a pinnacle for them, and the value addedness as judged by formal external bodies puts them in the top 10% in the whole of the UK, not just in Wales and not just in Gwent. So I think that's something that people should bear in mind. In terms of ALM, very, very keen and pleased to hear about the ALM provision that the new college is investing in and is concerned about, because we've gone through a fairly long and detailed process of understanding the true nature and value of ALM in our own backyard. The project has been on the table for the best part of 2 decades, as I said earlier on. I think we owe a debt of gratitude to the careful, measured and sensible way that the leader of Coleg Gwent, Guy Lacey, in the short period of time that he's been in office, has allowed us to expand in terms of our input, in terms of our ideas being taken on board, in terms of cross-matching the needs of our pupils with what the colleges can provide. And this comes down to the transition processes as well. I think Dermot spelt it out fairly clearly in terms of we don't have a compact, or rather the college doesn't have a compact in the sense that we have a compact with our employees. But there is every effort being made to smooth the transition process. Not everybody will get a job. There will certainly be some slippage in that. But as far as we are able, we have worked very, very closely with Coleg Gwent to ensure a transition process that allows for every teacher that wants, every teacher currently teaching in these 6 forms that wants to have an interview for a job in the new institution can do, but it's not just those who might be teaching in the 6th form elements in these schools, but it's teachers at GCSE level as well who might very well want to be considered. So that net is widening all the time, and this comes back to this notion of why it is that we favour these teachers being looked at and assessed in their own environment, because it isn't just A-level teachers who are seasoned to teach in A-levels, it's GCSE teachers who will be allowed to teach their own GCSE classes, but they will be assessed on the basis of their teaching ability and will be selected or not as a consequence not necessarily whether they are teaching A-levels currently. So in the sense that we've tried our very best to make sure that the transition process is a fairly smooth one, clearly it's not going to work 100% perfectly to everybody's satisfaction. We are not miracle workers, but I think as far as it's humanly possible, the transition process can be well made and well progressed. The final thing I would want to say is this. We've been working through towards this for the best part of 2 decades, as I said earlier on. I think it's in the best interest of all learners in our borough, not just those who are currently privileged to be taught in a 6th form, and I can understand why they are attached to that particular regime, but what I would say to those is that given the opportunity, this kind of model, and the model that we are anticipating is a slightly smaller version of the model that exists in the learning zone in Ebervale. I think it's something around about 65 to 70% the size, the one we are contemplating, but it's done on the same kind of blueprint, if you like, and I am always impressed when I go there that this is a learning zone well named because it does facilitate learning in the best possible way. I can't wait for this to happen because it's been a long time coming, and I think it will be a beneficial institution for all learners in the borough.
Okay. On that basis, can I move to the recommendations at 11.1?
Before you do that, Chair, could I just make a comment first of all? I think a very strong argument has been put forward, I think, for Sixth Form College post-16, and, which I totally support, no question about that. But I'm still not convinced that the faith school element is not going to be protected. I was minded earlier on to, because on moral grounds, to abstain on this vote because I am a governor of St Albans, and St Albans have objected to this proposal. But looking at the recommendations, I don't think that commits me to anything really, because it's a matter of just submitting it to the Works Assembly, and the decision presumably will be made later. And so I vote for the recommendations, but I've still got my extreme concerns about the faith school element within the Sixth Form College.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate the Cabinet Member for Education and yourself as the leader, and in particular the officers who worked very hard on this over a period of a number of years, the Chief Executive for the input that she had some 3-4 years ago, and continuing up to the date. And so I think it's a wonderful exercise, a wonderful opportunity for Torfaen, something which we've clamoured for and asked for probably 20, 30 years. The argument has been there about sixth form provision in Torfaen. I think we look back on this experience as one which was hard work, yes, but one which was very worthwhile. So I'd like to congratulate all those people that have been involved in it. Well done.
Great. Any more contributions? Okay, on that basis, I'll move to the recommendations then. They're on 11.1 on the report. Can I show all members in favour? And against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank Dermot and John for taking the time to go through that. I know it took a while, but I think, as I said, it shows that both we've got a positive vision, but that we recognise it's a work in progress, and we need to work hard to make the most of it for our young people and for our staff. If we move on now to agenda item 10, that's the final business case for the Sixth Form Centre.
Excuse me, Chair. So obviously this falls directly on. So, Chair, this obviously follows on directly from the last discussion. Next step in the process is to now seek approval to submit the final business case to Welsh Government for the new Sixth Form Centre, replacing all the English medium Sixth Form in... Oh, sorry, I'll just wait for Councillor Clark to come back. Obviously, again, this is quite familiar, so I'll travel at some pace unless anyone wants me to stop and slow down. Obviously, we're looking at an investment of £20 million, 50% provided by Council, 50% provided by Welsh Government. We have to submit the full business case, because that's the next stage in the process to be able to secure its 50% contribution. And we're still aiming for the investment in the buildings and site to be ready for use from September 2019, so not too far away at all. The paper, I think, Chair, is quite straightforward and quite self-explanatory, so I don't want to go through from 5.1 and following the issues and findings in specific detail, but rather to say we've obviously covered this ground before. If there are any specific questions there in terms of the strategic case, economic case, commercial and financial case, the management case, then we're really happy to answer those questions. But I think we've covered this in some detail previously. I would draw your attention specifically to page 158 and following, which gives you a time scale from this point forward about where we think, what we think is going to happen and when. That takes you through every sort of part of the process as best we can guess. Clearly, this is contingent on when we also get feedback from the Cabinet Secretary in terms of the decision on the last paper. But we still think this is achievable and the best estimate of the timing that we can have at the moment. So actions to be taken following this. If approved, we'd submit the full business case. We've already got on with the design process, and you've got copies of the design in your bundle today as well of where we are at the moment. We've had ongoing discussions with the governing body, looking at the 11 to 16, 11 to 18 proposals and making sure we don't prejudice the outcome of any of the consultations in that design. I think the school are now very happy with the designs as they currently stand. So a lot of work's been happening there. We'll continue that design process clearly, because if we want to hit that timescale, then we need to move with some pace. So I'll really stop and ask if there are any. Sorry, just ask John.
Just clarify for members that the diagrams that we've included in the report are from the master planning process, so they're not the bespoke design drawings for the post-16 facility that we're hoping to establish. Master planning was undertaken with Welsh Government really because it's a strategic site within Cwmbran. It clearly has capacity to deliver more than just the proposal that we're trying to get approval for. So that is not the design of the building. It is an indication of how the site may look and what the building might look like.
Which are obviously the designs that we're working with the school are the ones that they're really happy with. When those designs are actually at a point we can share them, then clearly we'll be bringing that back to Cabinet and making them available to members. But because it is a design process, things change, and at any one point in time when you're through that process, those designs are open to change. The point I'm really making, I think, is that the school have been consulted with and are working very strongly with us to make sure that the designs are as good as they can be.
That's great. Any members want to make contributions or ask questions for this report? Okay, it's good to see the things coming together with some designs, and I look forward to seeing more in the future of this if we vote to approve this today. So can I have a show of all members looking at the recommendations in favour? And that's carried. Thank you very much. On to the proposed Welsh language standards submission. I'm bringing Lyndon Puddy.
Good morning all. Morning Leader. Morning Cabinet. This paper before you this morning is the results of a number of discussions that's taken place over the last number of months with colleagues within the Council, but also very helpful meetings that we've had with the Welsh Language Commissioner's Office around the implications to the standards that the Council is appealing as part of the process. The Council is formally appealing 32 of the standards, and we've had very good conversations around how they impact across Torfaen in being both reasonable and proportionate. You have an appendix as part of this report that we've worked together as officers to submit to the Welsh Language Commissioner's Office with Cabinet approval to seek the view of the Commissioner in whether those proposed rewordings are acceptable as part of our final compliance notice following conclusion of the appeals process. We hope that the Commissioner will look on the document favourably. We would expect then a swift response from the Commissioner's Office to whether they accept the rewording or whether they will impose the original standards on the Council. Dependent upon the response from the Commissioner's Office, I would expect to bring a report back to the Leader and the Chief Executive as part of that process. But this report simply requests a formal permission to submit Appendix 1 as part of our ongoing discussions around the appeal process. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, I'd like to thank Lyndon for the hard work he's put into this. It's been a long process, but I think the pragmatic approach that we've taken of being supportive whilst pointing out the practical and resource implications of some of the standards is the right approach to take. So on that basis, unless anyone else wishes to speak, I'd like to move the recommendations. Everyone in favour? That's carried. Thank you, Lyndon. Item 12, bring in Duncan Smith.
The first item relates to a public footpath in Newport Road, Llantarnam, between Newport Road and Llantarnam Road. This has been an ongoing issue that's been to Cabinet several times. This report is purely for information. So if I go through the key messages, I think members will understand what has happened. The applicant has decided to withdraw their application for the footpath. Their decision was based on the fact that the developer of Llantarnam Comprehensive School, Barrett's, have made provision for the footpath on adopted highway that will be part of that development. Although not directed to by the planning inspectorate, we basically can take no action because the footpath will be there, if you like, and this is why the applicant has withdrawn. The new link was included in the developer's planning application submitted to the authority, and that obtained planning consent on the 22nd of November. Thank you.
Okay, do any members have any questions at this stage? So the recommendation is purely to note the report at 12.1 there on page 238. Show of hands in favour? That's carried. Thank you, Duncan. So you're on to agenda item 13 then. You don't get away that easily. Waste, Heads of the Valleys Green Waste Project, the procurement project.
Yeah, this relates to a contract procedure that we're going through at the moment in terms of green waste. Essentially, currently at the moment, Viridor deal with the green waste produced in the borough. That's an interim contract. Currently due to run out at the end of March. There is a provision to extend that, and part of the recommendations I'm making is that you agree to an extension of that for reasons I'm going to come to in a moment. In terms of green waste and food, and bear in mind this is green, food is being dealt with separately by the same organisation. The Heads of the Valleys Organic Project has been set up. That's a consortium of authorities, Blaen y Gwent, Monmouthshire, Newport and ourselves to procure for green and food waste. And Paras 5.4 to 5.7 set out the details of the arrangements that have been made. To cut to the chase, we're a little bit behind time at the moment. We expected to let contracts that we're going through that process by the 1st of April. We can't do that, but we're very close. And so during the election period, I'm looking for powers, delegated powers, to deal with these contracts, or to let contracts should that arise. Now, normally a contract of this nature falls below 2 million. It would be for me to determine based on lowest cost. If it weren't lowest cost, if it were other issues, it would come to Cabinet. What I'm asking for powers, delegated powers, is to determine should it not be economically the most advantageous contract. So if the price is higher than the other contract price, but it's a better deal, that I'd be able to approve that. Normally that would come through Cabinet. So I'm asking for the interim. If things take a little bit longer, it may be that I will come to a Cabinet in the new administration. If that weren't the case, our plan is to set off with this contract by July the 1st, if we let. And if it happens in that period, we'll have to allow the contractor at least 2 months to get his contracts together. So we'd have to notify by May, June. So I'm asking for delegated powers set out at the end to determine, based on consultation with the Assistant Chief Exec Resources, Head of Procurement and the Interim Monitoring Officer. Thank you.
Any comments?
No, nothing to add to that. Sorry I missed the first part of it. Some lady was talking to me outside. But Duncan and I have gone through this, so I would totally support the recommendations.
Great. Any other members want to mention? I read yesterday that Wales has gone right up the league tables in terms of recycling, so I guess this is a part of that good news story, the effort that's gone in from yourself, your officers and John to help bring up our recycling rates. So thank you for all your efforts there. And moving to the recommendations on page 248 at 13.1 and 13.2. I'd like to move those. Members in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much, Duncan. And that brings the meeting to a close. Thank you, members.